Okay, so for today's Dhamma talk, last Dhamma talk of this retreat, we're going to be talking about what you can do off retreat and what are the principles or what are the guidelines for one who is in higher training. So the sutta I'm reading today is from Majjhima Nikaya 53, and it is the Sekha Sutta, the disciple in higher training. Thus have I heard, on one occasion the Blessed One was living in the Sakyan country at Kapilavatthu in Nigrodha's park. Now on that occasion, a new assembly hall had recently been built for the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu, and it had not yet been inhabited by any recluse or Brahmin or human being at all. When the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu, then the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu went to the Blessed One. After paying homage to him, they sat down at one side and said to him, "Venerable Sir, a new assembly hall has been recently built here for the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu, and it has not yet been inhabited by any recluse or Brahmin or human being at all. Venerable Sir, let the Blessed One be the first to use it. When the Blessed One has used it first, then the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu will use it afterwards. That will lead to their welfare and happiness for a long time." The Blessed One consented in silence. Then, when they saw that he had consented, they got up from their seats, and after paying homage to him, keeping him on their right, they went to the assembly hall. They covered it completely with coverings and prepared seats, and they put out a large water jug and hung up an oil lamp. Then they went to the Blessed One, and after paying homage to him, they stood at one side and said, "Venerable Sir, the assembly hall has been covered completely with coverings and seats have been prepared. A large water jug has been put out and an oil lamp hung up. Let the Blessed One come at his own convenience." Then the Blessed One dressed, and taking his bowl and outer robe, he went with the Sangha of bhikkhus to the assembly hall. When he arrived, he washed his feet and then entered the hall and sat down by the central pillar facing the east. And the bhikkhus washed their feet and then entered the hall and sat down by the western wall facing east, with the Blessed One before them. And the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu washed their feet and entered the hall and sat down by the eastern wall facing the west, with the Blessed One before them. Then, when the Blessed One had instructed, urged, roused, and gladdened the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu with talk on the Dhamma, and for much of the night, he said to the Venerable Ananda, "Ananda, speak to the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu about the disciple in higher training who has entered upon the way." In other words, he's talking about talk to them about what happens after you attain stream entry, or somebody who has attained a path. But a larger extension of that would be somebody who is on the path, who is following the Eightfold Path and cultivating the path. "My back is uncomfortable. I will rest it." "Yes, Venerable Sir," the Venerable Ananda replied. Then the Blessed One prepared his patchwork cloak, folded in four, and lay down on his right side in the lion's pose, with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and fully aware, after noting in his mind the time for rising. So he determined what time he would wake up from his rest. You can do that. That's one of the things that you can practice. You can determine in your mind the night before you get up. Determine that you will wake up, let's say 5:08 in the morning or 6:01 in the morning. And you'll see that after a little while, the mind actually wakes up right at that time. This is exercising your ability to intentionalize when you'll arise. And, even for a nap, let's say, if you're going to take like a 15-minute nap or a 20-minute nap, eventually you can exercise your intention by saying, after 15 minutes, the mind will wake up. After 20 minutes, the mind will wake up. And you'll see that after a while, the mind hits exactly at that time. This helps a lot with the determinations to go into jhana for uh, a, a predetermined duration of time. So you can go into the first jhana for 5 minutes, the seventh jhana for 2 minutes, or you can go in micro levels. You can go to the first jhana for a couple of seconds, and then the fifth jhana for 5 seconds, and then the third jhana for 10 seconds, and so on. And this is a gradual exercise or a progressive exercise to be able to determine which jhana you want to be in at any given moment, and then ultimately cessation itself. And this is going into the territory of Nirodha Samapatti. Then the Venerable Ananda addressed Mahanama, the Sakyan, thus. Now, Mahanama was one of the cousins of the Buddha and Ananda. Mahanama, here a noble disciple is possessed of virtue, guards the doors of his sense faculties, is moderate in eating and devoted to wakefulness. He possesses 7 good qualities, and he is one who obtains at will, without trouble or difficulty, the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now. You can see for yourself, after you come off a retreat, you can intend to stay in the first jhana for a little bit. You can intend to send out loving kindness to everybody. You can intend to send out compassion. It's just a matter of bringing up your intention and then staying with it and then radiating that experience, radiating that particular Brahma Vihara. So when you get off retreat, you can find now you'll have the holidays coming up. And if you're spending time with your family, you are going and visiting friends, or just staying and people coming visiting you, or whatever it might be. It can be sometimes a very interesting or sometimes even stress-inducing situation. But if you can replace that and 6R that, and then replace it with loving kindness and compassion, imbuing the entire room with loving kindness, with compassion, whether or not they feel, the people that you have in the room feel it or not, you will see that your actions and your speech will be rooted in that loving kindness, will be rooted in that compassion. So when you speak, you will be reciprocated with loving and kind words in compassionate speech and actions. And people will be drawn to you. So you'll actually make that time a quite pleasant time during the holidays. And how is a noble disciple possessed of virtue? Here, a noble disciple is virtuous. He dwells restrained with the restraint of the patimokkha. He is perfect in conduct and resort, and seeing fear in the slightest fault, he trains by undertaking the training precepts. This is how a noble disciple is possessed of virtue. Now, anytime they say noble disciple or noble bhikkhu or noble bhikkhuni, this comes from the Pali Arya Savaka. Arya denotes someone who has an attainment. But like I said, by extension, this can be for anybody who is walking the path. But in a very specific way, when they say noble or Arya, they're referring to somebody who has an attainment. And what you're going to find is if you have an attainment, it will be difficult for you to break precepts. When you do break precepts, your mind will immediately recognize that it's broken a precept, and it will want to take the precepts again. So you can either confess it to a spiritual friend or just retake the precept with the determination not to break it again. Now, in terms of the precepts, there are the 5 basic precepts. You're welcome to take any number of precepts. You can take the 5 precepts, you can take the 8 precepts, you can take the 10 precepts, whatever works for you and your lifestyle. At a minimum, you want to take the 5 precepts. I recall an interesting remark by Bhante Vimalaramsi, where somebody asked him a question. what do I need to do in order to become wealthy and successful? And Bhante said, you have to take the precepts, because by taking the precepts, you purify your mind and you cultivate a mind that is quite attentive, and therefore it can be oriented towards successful ventures and so on and so forth. And so the individual asked Bhante, okay, how long do I have to keep the precepts? And Bhante said, why don't you start off at 100 years and then see what happens? So this is not a one-time thing. You don't keep the precepts just on retreat. You keep them for your entire life. The more you keep the precepts, maintain them, the more purified your mind becomes. The easier the meditation happens, the easier you get into wisdom, into the practice of insight, which leads to the experience of Nibbana. What I mean by the practice of insight is clarity of mindfulness, to be able to recognize when there is the arising and passing away of any kind of craving or aversion. And not only during the meditation, but just about any point in time during your waking state, and eventually even your sleeping states. And you'll be able to see when there is an intention to be unwholesome, and you'll be able to recognize that and let that go using the 6 R's, replacing it with something wholesome. The more you do that, the more you see that your meditation is good, improving, and ultimately leading to the experience of cessation. And how does a noble disciple guard the doors of his sense faculties? On seeing a form with the eye, a noble disciple does not grasp at its signs and features, since if he left the eye faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the eye faculty. He undertakes the restraint of the eye faculty. This restraint doesn't mean suppression. It comes from the word samvara, which really means, if you think about it, it really means to keep or maintain awareness. So in other words, you are maintaining your mindfulness in every experience, whether it's the experience through what you're seeing, through what you're hearing, through what you're smelling, through what you're tasting, through what you're feeling or touching, and through what you're thinking. And when you are mindful, you have attention rooted in reality, yoniso manasikara. When you have that, you are able to see everything as being an impersonal process, which means you don't take it so serious. You don't take whatever anything happens personally. If somebody says something to you, good, bad, or indifferent, you don't take it personally. And therefore, you guard your sense faculties when you do that. When you guard them, you don't have hindrances arising. You don't have craving arising. You don't have aversion arising. You don't have restlessness arising. You don't have doubt arising. And you don't have sloth and torpor arising. When you are mindful to that extent, you don't have any underlying tendencies towards craving, aversion, ignorance, conceit, doubt, views, towards bhava, or towards, well, I said ignorance already, but basically the 7 underlying tendencies which underlie any of the feelings, any of the experiences won't arise. When that happens, they don't give rise to any craving, and therefore that craving will not give rise to any clinging. And that clinging will not give rise to any being or habitual tendencies. And those habitual tendencies will not give rise to birth of new action, causing new karma. And then that karma is to be experienced at a later point, at some point in your life or a future life, as an effect, as an old karma. So on hearing a sound with the ear, on smelling an odor with the nose, on tasting a flavor with the tongue, on touching a tangible with the body, on cognizing a mind object with the mind, a noble disciple does not grasp at its signs and features. Since if he left the mind faculty unguarded, evil, unwholesome states of covetousness and grief might invade him. He practices the way of its restraint. He guards the mind faculty and the other faculties. He undertakes this restraint of the sense faculties. This is how a noble disciple guards the doors of his sense faculties. So you have to see that the practice is not just meditation, sitting meditation, or walking meditation. The practice translates to mindfulness in every given moment. The practice translates to understanding that whatever is arising in the form of a sensory experience is karma to be experienced and felt. But as soon as you react to it by identifying with, taking it to be serious, taking it to be me, mine, or myself, then you are liable to cause craving and ultimately create suffering in the mind. Even if it's a painful feeling, even if it's a grievous experience, see it for what it is, which is impermanent, liable to cause dukkha, and therefore should not be considered as self. It be taken as being personal. And when you do that, you're no longer reacting to the situation. You no longer are reactionary to the situation. You're no longer are reactive to the situation. Instead, you are responding with wisdom, with clarity of mind. If you find that there's a reactionary thought coming in relation to the experience, six art. As soon as you six art, there is spaciousness in the mind, clarity in the mind, and the mind is able to then discern, use viveka. Remember we talked about viveka last time, is able to use attention rooted in reality and then cultivate either loving kindness or compassion or joy or equanimity or tranquility, depending upon what is required for the situation. And so that response is not liable to produce any new karma. Why? Because that response is rooted in right view. It's rooted in right intention of letting go, of taking it personal, of cultivating loving kindness or compassion or any of the Brahma Viharas. And it is rooted if you're speaking in right speech, acting in right action, or having a livelihood that is rooted in right livelihood. And because you're using right effort, you have right mindfulness and possibly collectedness in that moment to be able to respond in a way that doesn't produce new karma. Because the Buddha has said on a few occasions, on more than a few occasions, that the cessation of karma is the Eightfold Path. Any action that is rooted in the Eightfold Path, whether it's verbal, mental, or physical, is not liable to produce new karma. That's why one has said that the Arahat's mindset, it's the Arahat's operating system, so to speak, is the Eightfold Path. And so any behavior that the Arahat produces is rooted in the Eightfold Path. And therefore their actions are kiriya. That's a technical term to say non-producing karma, meaning it's not producing any new karma. It's just an impersonal activity, an impersonal thought, or an impersonal verbalization. And how is a noble disciple moderate in eating? Here, reflecting wisely, a noble disciple takes food neither for amusement, nor for intoxication, nor for the sake of, excuse me, nor for the sake of physical beauty and attractiveness, but only for the endurance and continuance of this body, for ending discomfort and for assisting the holy life, the meditative practice. Considering I shall terminate old feelings, the old karma of hunger, without arising new feelings of craving, and I shall be healthy and blameless and shall live in comfort. This is how a noble disciple is moderate in eating. Now for monastics, they eat up until noon. They don't eat anything after noon in terms of solid foods. They can have certain kinds of things, but not actual food, not any kind of full meal after 12 o'clock, after noon. So some monastics choose to eat once a day, and some choose to eat twice a day, breakfast and lunch, like 11 o'clock or 11:30, whatever it might be. Now, in the lay life, you can choose to eat whatever time you want to eat. You can choose to have one meal, you can choose to have two meals, you can choose to have three meals. You can choose to have one meal during breakfast, or one meal during lunch, or one meal during dinner. It's really up to you, whatever suits your health, whatever suits your schedule, and whatever is most efficient for you. But regardless of whatever meal plan you choose for yourself, so to speak, it's important to understand that when you are eating, your mind or your mindfulness is sharp. So you're not allowing the mind to crave for more. You're seeing how mind is eating, or mind is watching this process of eating going on. And you're watching how mind responds. Is there craving for more? Or is there aversion to a bitter taste? Is there craving for a specific kind of taste? When you see that, 6R, and just come back to the present moment of eating. When we talk about mindful eating, it's not mindfully just noticing in the moment how you're picking up a piece of food and staying in your mind, noting, eating, chewing, swallowing. These verbalizations are not going to aid you in anything. Instead, the right mindfulness is to notice how mind reflects or relates to the food, relates to the process of eating. Is it taking it personally? Is it seeing it as being more than what it actually is, which is to fuel the body so that it can practice, so that it can live its life day to day? Not for physical beauty, not for intoxication, not for enjoyment. Now, there's nothing wrong with enjoying food, but understand that there can be craving that arises when you take it personal and say, I want more of this, when you're not paying attention to whether your body is full, actually feeling full. And one way you can help to understand if the body is feeling full is to take smaller bites, chew carefully, and wait before your next bite. This gives enough time, allots enough time for the signal from the intestines, from the stomach to the brain, let it know that it's full. And then the sensation of fullness arises. So don't just eat in a haphazard manner. Eat with mindfulness, but correct or right mindfulness, understanding what is happening in the mind in relation to what it is that you're eating and how you are eating. And how is a noble disciple devoted to wakefulness? Here, during the day, while walking back and forth and sitting, a noble disciple purifies his mind of obstructive states. What are the obstructive states? The obstructive states are craving, aversion, doubt, restlessness, sloth, and torpor. In the first watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, he purifies his mind of obstructive states. In the middle watch of the night, he lies down on the right side in the lion's pose with one foot overlapping the other, mindful and fully aware, after noting in his mind the time for rising. After rising in the third watch of the night, while walking back and forth and sitting, he purifies his mind of obstructive states. That is how a noble disciple is devoted to wakefulness. When we talk about wakefulness, it's not just being wakeful and energetic, but it's being aware, it's being mindful, it's being alert in every given moment of what is happening. Are there hindrances arising in your mind while you're driving, while you're walking, while you're shopping, while you're talking, while you're eating, while you're showering? Whatever it is you're doing, is there aversion happening? Is there sloth and torpor? If you notice any of the hindrances, 6R them. Come back to the present moment of whatever it is you're doing. This is true wakefulness. Now, in terms of the sleep pattern that's described, You sleep according to how you sleep. If you need 6 hours of sleep, get 6 hours of sleep. If you need 7 hours of sleep, get 7 hours of sleep. If you need 8 hours of sleep, get 8 hours of sleep. If you need to take a nap in the daytime, take a nap in the daytime. But be aware of how you go to sleep in terms of how your posture is, what the mind is in relation to that posture, whether the mind is craving for sleep or it's just allowing the mind to rest, allowing itself to rest in that sleep. And then when it wakes up, are there hindrances arising when the mind becomes awake, when the body becomes awake? Is there craving for something when you wake up? Is there aversion for getting up? Is there tiredness? Is there sloth and torpor? As soon as you wake up, bring in mindfulness and see where your mind is. What is your very first thought when you wake up? Are you smiling when you wake up? Is your mind alert when you wake up? And when you notice that there are unwholesome states, 6 are them. 6 are them as soon as you wake up, and you will start to fall into the habit of 6-ring every hindrance and coming back to a wakeful state. The Buddha, or the way the Buddha is known, is as the Buddha, which comes from the word to be awake. So he has awakened from the dream of existence. The dream of existence is a mindset which is enamored by the 6 sense-based experiences. It's enamored and gets distracted and has hindrances. But the awakened mind is one that is fully aware in every given moment, free of any hindrances, free of any craving, free of any kind of conceit, free of ignorance. And how does a noble disciple possess 7 good qualities? Here, a noble disciple has faith. He places his faith in the Tathagata's enlightenment thus: the Blessed One is accomplished, fully enlightened, perfect in true knowledge and conduct, sublime, knower of worlds, incomparable, leader of persons to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, enlightened and blessed. So here what it's talking about is faith in the Buddha, but also by extension, faith in the Dhamma and faith in the Sangha. But what is faith? Faith is not blind faith. It's not that anyone is asking you to believe in the Buddha just because you have to believe in him, or to believe in the Dhamma just because you have to believe in it, because it will lead to your salvation, or anything like that. When we talk about faith, Saddha or Shraddha in Sanskrit, we're talking about conviction. We're talking about a cultivated faith. Faith that is cultivated from experience, seeing for yourself how this process works. And that starts with faith in your own capabilities, faith in your own capacities to be able to maintain sila, to be able to maintain the precepts, to be able to meditate, to be able to 6R, to be able to have mindfulness, to be able to cultivate the jhanas, to be able to experience nibbana. Have faith in your own abilities, and that faith is cultivated from gratitude, taking inventory of the assets in your mind and heart. What that means is when you wake up in the morning, spend 5 to 10 minutes having gratitude, coming to appreciation for the things you possess in terms of wholesome states of mind. See how you might be generous, see how you might be grateful, see how you might be cultivating loving kindness, see how you might be a peacemaker. See all of these different qualities, because these kinds of qualities uplift the mind and they create conviction in the mind to continue to cultivate sila, to continue to perfect samadhi, and to continue to experience insight and wisdom, and ultimately the fruition of the path, which is this complete cessation of suffering. He has shame. He is ashamed of misconduct in body, speech, and mind, ashamed of engaging in evil, unwholesome deeds. He has fear of wrongdoing. He is afraid of misconduct in body, speech, and mind, afraid of engaging in evil, unwholesome deeds. Shame and fear of wrongdoing. It's more about being proactive to maintain the precepts. It's more about understanding the consequences of what could happen if you break a precept. You know what can happen. And so there is an understanding. There is an awareness. There is a knowing of the consequences of what could happen. And this is what motivates the mind to keep the precepts. And then when you do break the precepts, or if you do break the precepts, you immediately take them again with the determination that you won't do them. Because if you have an attainment and you break a precept, in the case of the stream enterer and in the case of the Sakadagami, because there will still be some craving and aversion that is liable to cause the breaking of precepts. If you do, your mind will immediately recognize that, and there will be a slight tension because an unwholesome state of mind has arisen. And when you notice it, 6R it and make the determination to not break that precept again after taking precepts. He has learned much. Remembers what he has learned and consolidates what he has learned. Such teachings are good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. With the right meaning and phrasing, and affirm a holy life that is utterly perfect and pure. Such teachings as these he has learned much of, remembered, recited verbally, investigated with the mind, and penetrated well by view. What this is talking about really is continuing to develop your mindfulness. Mindfulness comes from the word sati. Sati comes from the word smriti. Smriti means to remember. You continue to remember to observe how mind's attention moves. If you do just that and you let go of unwholesome states, you are cultivating the Eightfold Path. If you continue to see for yourself how this process works, you are remembering in that moment through the process of direct experience. And therefore you are learning in that way the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, which is effective, easy, and known by the wise. You investigate not by analyzing or contemplating, but by understanding in that moment of experience with direct knowledge and vision. And that's how you penetrate well by view. He is energetic in abandoning unwholesome states and in undertaking wholesome states. He is steadfast, firm in striving, not remiss in developing wholesome states. This is talking about the 4 right efforts, which are part of right effort, which is, remember, the heart of the Eightfold Path. And every time you 6R, you are utilizing right effort, and therefore the rest of the Eightfold Path. He has mindfulness. He possesses the highest mindfulness and skill. He recalls and recollects what was done long ago and spoken long ago. This is referring to having clarity of mind, being aware of every given moment, and utilizing the practice. When you recall and recollect, it's not just remembering the practice, but applying the practice based on your experience, based on what you have learned through direct experience. He is wise. He possesses wisdom regarding rise and disappearance. That is to say, the arising and cessation, the arising and passing away. That is noble and penetrative and leads to the complete destruction of suffering. That is how a noble disciple possesses 7 good qualities. Whenever they use the word wise, they're referring to one who has understood and seen for themselves with direct knowledge and vision and experience, dependent origination. The one possesses the wisdom regarding the arising and passing away of dependent origination. That is noble, that leads to an attainment through an experience of nibbana, and is penetrative, sees the impersonal nature of dependent origination, and leads to the complete destruction of suffering, which can lead, or rather, what it's saying is leads to arahatship, the complete destruction of mental suffering. Remember, an arahat can still experience physical suffering, but that is not accompanied by any mental agitation. And how is a noble disciple one who obtains at will without trouble or difficulty the four jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now? Here, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, a noble disciple enters upon and abides in the first jhana. With the stilling of applied and sustained thought, he enters upon and abides in the second jhana. With the fading away as well of rapture, he enters upon and abides in the third jhana. With the abandoning of pleasure and pain, he enters upon and abides in the fourth jhana, which has neither pain nor pleasure, and purity of mindfulness due to equanimity. That is how a noble disciple is one who obtains at will, without trouble or difficulty, the four jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now. Now, when one has an attainment and one has enough practice with the jhanas, it's very easy. In the beginning, it was difficult, or it was even undecipherable, let's say, to know which jhana your mind was in. But as you continue to practice, as you experiment in the sense of seeing what happens when you cultivate loving kindness, seeing what happens when you cultivate compassion, seeing what happens when you radiate them, seeing what happens when you have joy or equanimity, seeing what happens and examining what factors or cofactors arise in relation to them, and just going through the first to the fourth jhanas to the arupa jhanas, you can do this with greater ease with more practice. So continue to cultivate the jhanas and you'll see that it becomes buttery smooth for you to obtain the experience of a particular jhana. That's why when you attain the quiet mind, you don't need to go through each of the jhanas. You just go through radiating equanimity for a couple of minutes in each direction, and then radiating equanimity all throughout. And then when that equanimity ceases, whatever is remaining, that is the quiet mind, and you stay there. So it's easy for you to just bypass everything and come to equanimity and then finally to quiet mind. When a noble disciple has thus become one who is possessed of virtue, who guards the doors of his sense faculties, who is moderate in eating, who is devoted to wakefulness, who possesses 7 good qualities, who obtains at will without trouble or difficulty the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now. He is called one in higher training who has entered upon the way, the higher training towards future attainments. His eggs are unspoiled. He is capable of breaking out, capable of enlightenment, capable of attaining the supreme security from bondage, capable of attaining arahatship. Suppose there were a hen with 8 or 10 or 12 eggs, which she had covered, incubated, and nurtured properly. Even though she did not wish, oh, that my chicks might pierce their shells with the points of their claws and beaks and hatch out safely. Yet the chicks are capable of piercing their shells with the points of their claws and beaks and hatching out safely. So too, when a noble disciple has thus become one who is possessed of virtue, who guards the doors of his sense faculties, who is moderate in eating, who is devoted to wakefulness, who possesses 7 good qualities, who obtains at will without trouble or difficulty the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now. He is called one in higher training who has entered upon the way. So what this is saying is there is a naturalness to this whole process. You don't have to intend the cessation. You don't have to intend nibbana. If you do these things, cultivating the sila, cultivating the Eightfold Path, using mindfulness in every moment by determining by seeing, recognizing craving and aversion and letting go of it, realizing the hindrances in every given moment and letting go of it. By going into jhana practice, by experiencing the Brahma-viharas and then going into quiet mind, inevitably you will experience nibbana. You don't have to force it. You don't have to push it. Just do take care of these things and the rest will come. And let go of your attachment to cessation. Let go of any idea that you will attain nibbana or cessation. Just let go of any desire for it. Anyone who experiences an attainment will tell you that they let go even of the desire for nibbana. And lo and behold, they experience nibbana. His eggs are unspoiled. He is capable of breaking out, capable of enlightenment, capable of attaining the supreme security from bondage. Based upon that same supreme mindfulness, whose purity is due to equanimity, that is to say, based on being in the fourth jhana, this noble disciple recollects his manifold past lives, thus with their aspects and particulars. Now, all of this that we're talking about here, you don't need to do it. If you have an interest in it, do it after a little while, after you have some mastery of the jhanas. I would even say wait until you have an attainment if you want to get into past lives and other things like that. Thus, with their aspects and particulars, he recollects his manifold past lives. This is his first breaking out, like that of the hen's chicks from their shells. Based upon that same supreme mindfulness, whose purity is due to equanimity, with the divine eye, which is purified and surpasses the human, this noble disciple sees beings passing away and reappearing. He understands how beings pass on according to their actions. That is karma. This is his second breaking out, like that of the hen's chicks from their shells. Based upon that same supreme mindfulness, whose purity is due to equanimity, by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, this noble disciple here and now enters upon and abides in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom that are taintless, with the destruction of the taints. This is his third breaking out, like that of the hen's chicks from their shells. When a noble disciple is possessed of virtue that pertains to his conduct, when he guards the doors of his sense faculties, that pertains to his conduct. When he is moderate in eating, that pertains to his conduct. When he is devoted to wakefulness, that pertains to his conduct. When he possesses 7 good qualities, that pertains to his conduct. When he is one who obtains at will without trouble or difficulty, the 4 jhanas that constitute the higher mind and provide a pleasant abiding here and now, that pertains to his conduct. When he recollects his manifold past lives with their aspects and particulars, that pertains to his true knowledge. When with divine eye, he sees beings passing away and reappearing and understands how beings pass on according to their karma, that pertains to his true knowledge. True knowledge here is direct experience. When by realizing for himself with direct knowledge, he here now enters upon and abides in the deliverance of mind and deliverance by wisdom. This is referring to seeing dependent origination, that are taintless with the destruction of the taints, that pertains to his true knowledge. This noble disciple is thus said to be perfect in true knowledge, perfect in conduct, perfect in true knowledge and conduct. And this stanza was uttered by the Brahma Sanan Kumara. The noble clan is held to be the best of people as to lineage. The best of gods and humans is one perfect in true knowledge and conduct. Now, this has some kind of cultural bias, let's say. This has some kind of cultural understanding, because somebody had explained to me, when they talk about the noble clan here, that translation was from the word Kshatriya, which refers to the warrior class, which the Buddha was part of before he became the Buddha, and which the princes are a part of. And according to that understanding, the Brahma Sarankumpara says that the best of people are this particular clan, the clan of the Kshatriyas. But what's important to understand here, he's saying the second part of that, the best of gods and humans is one perfect in true knowledge and conduct. meaning one who cultivates the Eightfold Path, one who has an attainment, one who is perfect in true knowledge and conduct. Perfection here refers to one who attains the destruction of the taints, one who is taintless, one who is an arahant. Such a person is said to be the best of gods and humans. Of course, that's the understanding of this particular Brahma, because an arahant is no longer a being. Now, that stanza was well sung by the Brahma Sanan Kumara, not ill sung. It was well spoken, not ill spoken. It has a meaning and is not meaningless, and it was approved by the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One rose and addressed the Venerable Ananda thus: Good, good Ananda. It is good that you have spoken to the Sakyans of Kapilavatthu about the disciple in higher training who has entered upon the way. That is what the Venerable Ananda said. The teacher approved. The Sakyans of Kapilavatthu were satisfied and delighted in the Venerable Ananda's. So, does anybody have any questions?
Two questions actually that I've been holding off a little bit. The first one is there some average of how much practice you need to do each day to, for example, hold on to the first jhana or hold on to the quiet mind? Any idea about that? If one lives like a kind of quiet life?
You mean in terms of your daily practice, is there an average in terms of
how many hours to hold on to maybe the quiet mind, or I guess it's more difficult to be to be able to attain to the quiet mind continuously than to attain to the first jhana, for example.
Yeah, that's why it's always suggested that you sit for as long as you can so that you're able to stay in quiet mind for as long as you can. So here, the goal would be not to stay in any of the jhanas for too long, but to allow the mind to incline to quiet mind as soon as it can. If you can start with equanimity, or if you want to start with loving kindness and then move on to equanimity and then progress into quiet mind and then stay in quiet mind for as long as you can, that's better. But you don't want to hold on to it. Remember, you just want to observe it. I know you're saying in terms of meditation, but just to clarify for everybody, you don't want to hold on to any of the factors. You just want to observe them. So I would say a minimum of 3 hours a day.
In one sitting or in?
In one sitting.
Okay.
In one sitting, on average. Because that allows your mind to really deepen that silence, deepen that tranquility, and stay in a quiet mind for longer periods of time. Then that also cultivates further disenchantment and dispassion, which ultimately does lead to cessation and the experience of the unconditioned.
That makes sense, kind of. Or it makes sense. And the other question was, in David Johnson's book, there is talk about two different types of people, like the smart person and the emotional type, or like his two main disciples had different faculties, so to say. Is there any suttas that speak about this? Because I've noticed that most Buddhists I meet, they're very smart and they remember everything. Maybe not all, but and I don't feel smart. So I feel a lot what other people feel. So I suspect I'm the other type.
Yeah, you're definitely more of the empathic type, the one who is more feeling based. Mm-hmm. So there's two. There's the analytical, in the sense that they're working with their mind a lot more. And there is the intuitive, which works more with the heart, is more empathic. So they're able to take in other people's feelings. For that reason, they are able to be more psychic. If you are more of a feeling type of being, then it's much easier for such a person to develop psychic faculties. And so we talk about, you mentioned the two chief disciples, the two chief bhikkhus, which are Moggallana and Sariputta. Moggallana was more of the feeling type. He was more heart-based, let's say, emotional-based, more empathic. And for that reason, he had very deep mastery of all of the psychic faculties. And Sariputta was more analytical, more logical, more thinking based. And for that reason, he was considered somebody who was foremost in the different knowledges of the Dhamma, in the sense of, if you read, for example, Digha Nikaya 30, I think it's 33 and 34, basically the last two suttas of the Digha Nikaya, you'll see that Sariputta is able to list out all of the different things about the Dhamma because he's so analytical. He's like made it a systematic approach. He systemized that whole approach. So somebody with that kind of analytical skill is able to cultivate a different understanding of the Dhamma, not necessarily better or worse, because it's always dependent upon what kind of person, what kind of qualities of mind you have. Ultimately, they both experience the same nibbana. It's not like they experience a different kind of nibbana. It's just that the approach is different. Some people will continue to explore psychic faculties and through that experience nibbana and experience arahatship. Or others will experience arahatship through a more logical mind, just going through a step-by-step approach through the process of jhanas and just observing, which leads to nibbana as well. Psychic faculties, if you want to go to the route of psychic faculties, it'll take you a few years, at least a few years to actually go through that process. Whereas if you go through jhanas, it's much easier for the general public, let's say. It really depends upon your faculties.
I understand that and remember that from the book. But a further question is there any like suttas who speak to the emotional type? Like, because I find most of the teachings are more for the analytical types, like remember all these things and
yeah. When you look at some of the suttas, like even if you're looking at, let's say, Sariputta's awakening through the jhanas and everything else, it's implied that it is a balanced approach. It's an integrated approach. It's just that somebody with a stronger faculty, whether it's the mind or the heart, is just approaching it in a different way. If you go to, I'll have to find out where exactly it is, but it could be either the Samyutta Nikaya or the Anguttara Nikaya, where there's a series of suttas followed in succession about Moggallana's practice. So it talks about how he goes through the first jhana, then how he goes through the second jhana, how he goes through the third jhana, all the way to what's known as the signless collectedness of mind, and it experiences cessation of perception and feeling. I think to that extent, it does direct how such a person would experience jhana. Likewise, in the case of Sariputta.
Okay, thank you.
If we are able to find the sutta, hopefully we can put it in the description on the video, and then you can take a look at it.
Thank you very much.
I think it is also told in the suttas that Sariputta takes twice as long as Moggallana to reach arahatship.
Sorry, can you say that again? You cut off in the first couple of seconds.
I think in the suttas it also says that Sariputta took twice as long to reach nibbana or full enlightenment than Moggallana.
Yes.
Although it was just 2 weeks versus 1 week, I think.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Yeah, Moggallana was somebody who immediately grasped the whole practice and then cultivated for a week. Sariputta had to take a little longer because he was more analytical, so he really had a very deep understanding of each of the subjects of the Dhamma that lead to Nibbana. So He was a slow learner. I mean, just by a week, but still a slow learner.
Delson, can you mention a little something about like how the Sangha has an effect? Because I remember if I remember right, there's a sutta where the Ananda says something like he meditates and then he thinks, oh, I think the path is 50% meditation, 50% friendship, and then he tells the Buddha, and the Buddha said that he's wrong, but it's 100% friendship. And I just kind of wonder, like, because a lot of the stuff we do, like these retreats and so on, a lot of it is online, and then everyone kind of, I imagine everyone sort of disperses, right? So how does that, like the role of the Sangha, help in cultivating, let's say, as we continue to practice after this?
Yeah, that's a good question, because if you think about it, even during the Buddha's time, even though everyone was doing their own solitary practices and maybe they wouldn't be in contact or in communication, once a week they would all gather together to discuss the Dhamma, or whatever it was, once every fortnight or whatever it might have been, to discuss the Dhamma or to recite the Patimokkha or other things like that. So you see that there is an importance of community here, because it's the community that continues to support one another. So in the case of, the Sangha of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, they spend every full moon or something, where they are confessing, some of their actions, and then they determine that they're not going to do those wrong actions again. So it's a process of purification and things like that. Now, as a layperson, you don't really need to do that, but if it helps to have a spiritual friend, somebody who is in the practice that you can talk to, that you can discuss the Dhamma with, that's why, what Suttavada does and what Dhammasukha does in terms of having the Dhamma talks almost every week or every other week, or having these retreats or having these discussions whenever they can, it is trying to create, let's say, an online Sangha. It's trying to create an online community. And then you have other resources, which are like the Telegram support group and the Yahoo support group and other things like the Facebook support group. So to that extent, there is support given. There is a communal way of discussing the practice. But I think there is something to be said about the importance of having a spiritual friend that you can go to, send a message to, send an email to, communicate with, who can, help make sure that you're in the right direction, and vice versa. Because it's the community that keeps people not necessarily in check, but supports their practice by saying, hey, have you tried it this way? Have you tried it that way? Or there's somebody who knows that they can go to this particular person with a doubt, the question in mind, and they can discuss the Dhamma and help for themselves to clarify certain subtle points. So I see that as a very important factor. But of course, in today's reality, it is a little more difficult to maintain that kind of a Sangha. It's easier to have it more online and, have those chat groups and support groups like that. But of course, if you want, you can always build your local community and get in touch with people who are local, and be able to practice with them whenever you can. Having sitting groups, whether it's online or physical, is always a good thing. And here there's a note. It says, in the end of the retreat, we will provide the options for joining the community. So I guess you get an email with seeing how you can connect after the retreat, so you can continue your practice with like-minded people. Yes.
So today, during today's Dhamma talk about disciple in higher training, you mentioned that Sotapanna and Sadakami can break the Shila.
Yes.
So how much
That's
breaking?
right.
How much breaking they can do? How much breaking they can do?
They can break minor precepts, like they can tell a white lie, or they
Okay.
might have a glass of alcohol or something. Or I would say they wouldn't kill anybody, but they might harm someone with words. They might have harsh speech. They might have some kind of misconduct due to sensual attachments, things like that. But those precepts will be very minor. They wouldn't do things to the seriousness of killing someone or, having some kind of violent expression that harms somebody.
But which means if one goes to above the anagami, they don't even break that minor.
They don't, yeah.
They don't.
Because you see, the motivation to break precepts is the craving and aversion. But if they don't have the craving and aversion, the anagami will still have attachment to the Dhamma, but they'll never become vehemently attached to the Dhamma to the point that they would cause harm in trying to defend the Dhamma. But the Sotapanna and the Sakadagami still have aversion and craving. So because of that aversion and craving, they can lash out, they can use aggressive speech, they can be aggressive in their tone, and they can sometimes have a drink and break that precept as well. So when a Sakadagami or a Sotapanna does that, then they have to realize, and what will happen is because of that attainment, there will be an automatic understanding that, oh, wait, I just broke a precept. I should not have done that. Should not have done that. And then they will determine not to do that at a future time.
Yeah, but that will be very small, minor ones, right? If I hear
Yes,
you.
very minor.
And one more question. So, there is a map of a Visuddhimagga, but what I see now that you are not using that one, but more like a jhana model, let's say. Yeah. But jhana model, which is also not, which is described in Visuddhimagga, is more like because there, if you want to call the jhana, it should stay very long time. But here, if I understand, it can change quickly.
Yeah.
So what do you think about this model in the, Visuddhimagga? Do you think people doesn't need to follow that map, or I mean, it's not
I think,
automatic, or yeah.
Yeah, I think there's levels of intensity in every jhana. So if you want, after a certain while, you can actually experience intense factors of the jhana. I know some people are able to experience intense amounts of joy because of just the way they've cultivated, but not necessarily because it was one pointed concentration. It's just that their mind is able to bring up these pitti factors, so the factors of pitti and sukha and so on. But the way I see the Visuddhimagga model, which has, I guess, the 16 jhanas, I guess you're referring to that as well, the 16 insight knowledges. I know there's reference to the 16 insight knowledges in one sutta somewhere in the Majjhima Nikaya. I'm not sure exactly where. I might be mistaken, but this is what I've been told. But I tend to go with what is there in the majority of the suttas, which is always about jhanas. And usually, or primarily, I should say, the model that's being used by the TWIM community is the one that's in Anupada Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 111. Where it's conjoining both samatha and vipassana. It's the joining of serenity and insight, because in that particular sutta, you have Sariputta going through each of the jhanas and also understanding their impermanence. So understanding the three characteristics of each of the jhanas, and then heads towards the next jhana, the next jhana, the next jhana, and then ultimately attains the cessation of perception, feeling, and consciousness. So that's the primary model that we're using. Now, what I have been told by others is that there can be some level of compatibility when it comes to certain experiences that happen with the jnanas and with the jhanas. But I can only say that from what I've heard. I'd have to actually inspect it for myself to come to some kind of a conclusion. But I can see what they're referring to, because sometimes they're talking about the arising and passing away of things, the equanimity of formations, and other things like that, which you do have some kind of, seems like at the surface, similarity in the experience of what you have in the jhanas as they're described in Majjhima Nikaya 111.
Okay. So it's not a clear map for you about the 6 jhanas.
Well, I would say that I would say that
It's a model.
no, I think the model of the 16 jhanas, like I said, I can't conclude whether it's a compatible model with the jhanas or not. I would say that possibly it can be if the understanding is correct, because if the understanding is leading to one-pointed concentration, which suppresses the hindrances rather than purifies them, then I would say then it's misguided, because it strays away from what we see in the majority of the suttas, which is that in the majority of the suttas, it's talking about purification of the asavas through restraint, but that restraint is not suppression. Even though the translations might say suppression, it's more about being aware of it and letting it go, the abandoning of it, using the 4 right efforts. So there might be a possibility that the 16 jhanas are experienced through the jhanas, but I can't say for sure until I actually inspect them for myself.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I live with the idea, Delson,
Yes.
I have this idea that it is important to have a guide or have a teacher when you go to the jhanas, because that it is a possibility that you start to be attached to this feeling from the jhanas. Is that?
Yeah. There's a tendency for people not just to be attached to the jhanas because it feels good, but then also have a tendency to go into one-pointed focus, which leads to suppression and can lead to other things that don't cause the releasing of craving, the eradication of craving. So it is always good to have a guide, always good to have somebody who has, let's say, traversed the path, and then can kind of nudge you along the way of try it this way instead of this way, or make this tiny adjustment here, and then accordingly adjust the practice so that they experience it in a way that that allows for the release of suffering, that allows for the experience of nirodha.
That's okay. And I have another question about the feeling. I learned that the feeling is coming up after contact.
Yes.
And if this is a feeling meditation, where is the contact? Is the contact is also on the feeling? And
the contact is when you place your attention on the experience of metta. So the contact happens immediately. I'm glad you brought that up, because as I was referring to with the Anupada Sutta, the Majjhima Nikaya 111, there Sariputta talks about, or experiences certain factors that are accompanied by each of the jhanas, which includes contact, feeling, perception, intention, and attention. So the contact there is mind with the object of meditation, and that produces the feeling. Yeah.
Mind with the object of the meditation. The object is the metta feeling, metta.
And then that is experienced, that is actually felt by the mind.
And then that is felt by the mind, and then the feeling is coming up.
Then there's the feeling. So there's the contact. So first, actually, there's the intention, placing the mind and the attention of the mind on the object. Because of that placing of the attention is rooted in intention. Because of that, there arises contact, which is the meeting of the mind with the mind object, or object of meditation. That gives rise to the feeling of loving kindness, which then gives rise, or is tied with the perception that mind is experiencing loving kindness.
Okay. But then later on you take the feeling self as object, isn't it?
Yes, you basically rest Yeah, you basically anchor your mind around the feeling.
Yeah.
The thing is, with this practice, what is central to this practice is the 6 R's. The object can be anything, really, as long as the object is not one-pointed. The reason we use the Brahmaviharas is because it is a pleasant feeling from the get-go. From the start, the feeling is pleasant, and so it's easier for the mind to stay anchored in the present moment, to stay anchored with the object. And therefore, it's easier to 6R. So the central practice here is the right effort, which is really what equips, what creates the foundation for a good meditation practice. So you can take the breath, you could take any other object of meditation, as long as it's not one-pointed, and as long as you're using right effort to let go of any suffering, let go of any craving. So the feeling is used as an anchor to keep the mind collected.
Okay, feeling is the anchor. Okay. I thank you so far.
And when you say feeling in this context, you don't mean Vedana. You mean
No,
feeling
I
like
mean,
a Brahmavihara. You don't mean Vedana as in the as in
pleasant sensations or
unpleasant,
any kind of
neutral.
yeah. Although I will say, metta is generally a mental pleasant feeling, but in the context of what we're saying, we're talking, when you say feeling, we're referring to the actual Brahmavihara. Any other questions?
This is the last Dhamma, almost the last Dhamma talk. Tomorrow is the last Dhamma talk, because is there a possibility for dana?
Oh, you'll receive an email from the Suttavada team with opportunity to give dana, if you'd like.
Thank you.
And tomorrow, just so everybody knows, I've been telling everybody individually, but tomorrow we're going to have the Q&A. So there won't be any Sutta reading or Dhamma talk. It'll be just a general Q&A. So everybody will be welcome to answer, or rather ask any questions, accepting any personal questions. So you don't need to ask me about my practice or what practice I do personally or anything like that. Anything related to the practice, anything related to the suttas, anything related to what you've read or heard about, things like that. You're welcome to ask.
I have a question. So, as an example, let's say I like to take warm showers. Should then I have a little bit of craving related to that? Should I try not to have that craving?
Well, the warm shower in itself is not the source of the craving.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no actual craving for the warm shower. There's only an experience, a pleasant experience, a pleasant feeling of the warm shower. Now, let's say the warm shower suddenly turns cold and you start cursing and you say, what is happening here? And you start getting angry at the water company or the electricity or whatever it might be. Then you have craving. Then you have aversion. Then there is craving to arise. But the enjoyment of the hot water itself, nothing wrong with it at all. There's no craving there at all.
Okay, thank you.
Just as an aside to that, there's mentioning in the Vinaya of where the monastics would really enjoy saunas. They would have saunas and hot springs, and they would really enjoy spending time in those hot springs. There was no craving there. They were just having a pleasant feeling. So more power to you if you enjoy hot showers.
Maybe to add something that I came up with years ago is to really know whether there is craving present is imagine if someone would take that pleasant thing away. What will your reaction or response be? If you get upset in any way, then there was craving. But if you say, okay, fine, someone takes that piece of good food from my plate, please enjoy it, have fun with it, then there was no craving present. If someone takes a little fry from your plate and you get angry, there was craving present. So it's like a little trick to discover where there is craving.
And what about when you stay half an hour in the warm shower instead of 10 minutes or 15? Because it is so nice and so on, going on warm, warm, warm. I feel like there's craving.
Well, if you would get upset about when you haven't got the opportunity to be for half an hour because someone else wants to take a shower, if you get upset about that, then there is craving. But it might also be just a routine which you like. And when it gets disrupted in any way and you are fine with it, then there is no craving.
Okay.
Obviously, we also want to be ecologically mindful, so we don't want to waste water either. But you know, if you like a warm shower, go ahead, take one. Personally, I like cold showers. That's just me.
Well, you're in Cambodia where it's 30 degrees Celsius. Come here and try it again.
But there is also this saying that you say if the mind is going to somewhere else and is leaving the object, there is already craving.
Yes. Yes.
So
If a mind has no craving at all, yeah.
That is so simple that the mind is leaving to something else. It's so simple. Well, that is craving already.
Yes.
It's no.
If you're placing your attention on something and you have determined that your mind is going to stay there, if there's no craving present, let's say for that full hour, mind will stay there for that full hour. But if there's any movement of craving, that is to say, there's a thought that arises. Now there's craving for that thought that arises, and now the attention is swerving from there and going to that particular thought. Or if there's aversion, let's say, or any other kind of hindrance. So if mind moves, the movement of mind itself happens on it happens on a very subtle level because there is still present the asavas, the presence of the taint of sensual craving, the taint of being, or the desire to exist, and the taint of ignorance. If those three are still present, there will be movement of mind, even very slight. That can be in the form of restlessness, or that can be in the form of craving for a thought, or that can be in the form of aversion, or any of them.
But I have still difficulties with this half hour of shower. If there is this, if there's also the mind who is longing for longer, warm. It's the same water, but.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying about that. Yeah,
Yeah.
obviously, people have to be practical. They can't be staying in the shower for like half an hour, 45 minutes. You know, then at that point, you just basically, you know, you're enjoying it so much that you're not realizing that you're done with the shower. Now you're not actually having a shower. You're just enjoying the hot water rather than practical. It's almost very much like eating, right? When you talk about moderation in eating, there has to be moderation in everything. And that is dependent upon mindfulness. When you talk about moderation of eating, obviously you don't eat, you can enjoy that ice cream, or you can enjoy that piece of cake, or you can enjoy that vegetable, you can enjoy that fruit, or whatever it might be. But if you're eating and that plate is taken away from you, as Syl said, and you have anger, or irritation arise, obviously there was craving for it.
Yeah,
And if you're not mindful to see if there's, if the body is satisfied, that there is a sense of fullness, and you're still wanting that piece of chocolate cake, you're still wanting that extra bite, then obviously there's craving there because you're not paying attention to the requirements of the body. You're not paying attention to what's going on in relation to the body.
yeah.
Delson, does purification of the mind mean that you are reducing the hindrances? Is that the meaning?
Yes.
Okay. So when you are in meditation, if you endure pain during the meditation and you try to bring equanimity, does that produce purification of the mind?
As long as you continue to 6R the aversion to that pain. What you have to realize is that pain is just a manifestation of causes and conditions. It's just a phenomenon. It's just another painful feeling. But if there's aversion there, and you notice that your attention is going there because of the aversion to it, you're purifying your mind every time you 6R the aversion to it and let go of the attention to it.
Is that in any different from doing the same, but not in meditation, in not normal life?
Yeah.
Is it the same?
Yes.
So, okay.
So in other words, if you have a painful feeling while you are, well, let's not say a painful feeling while you're walking or anything like that, but just in normal daily life, another painful feeling would be somebody having very loud music being played. The neighbor is playing very loud music. You can't do anything about it. You can go to the neighbor and tell them, can you please lower the music? And if they listen to you, they listen to you. If they don't, you can't do anything beyond that except for enduring it, as you said. But when we talk about enduring it, doesn't mean you still have aversion to it. You let go of the aversion to that irritating music, to that loud music. So you're purifying your mind. You're always purifying your reactions to situations. So when you continue to 6R the craving, when you continue to 6R the aversion, you're purifying the way mind responds to situations. And so you're replacing the unwholesome with the wholesome qualities of mind.
So just to make it clear, when I have, let's say, when I have pain, if I react as a normal person, the reaction of the mind stays the same. If I try to bring relaxation, equanimity, if I 6R, I'm producing a long-term change to that same reaction.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
See, let's say you have physical pain. Somebody has a physical condition that causes a lot of pain. You obviously can take medicine. You obviously can take certain kinds of medication to relieve that pain if the doctor has given it to you. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with using medicine to solve physical problems. But there's a sutta called the two darts or the two arrows, which talks about how one who is unskilled or untrained, when they have a physical sensation that is painful arising, there is an immediate mental reaction to that, which is in the form of annoyance or irritation or frustration, basically aversion. But one with a trained mind can still experience physical pain, but accompanied by that, there won't be any mental suffering in the form of that aversion. Instead, there will be just a knowing that there is a painful feeling and treating that painful feeling.
Okay. So is that the reason why it's recommended not to react to the pain during the meditation, not to move the body, so produces purification? Okay.
Yeah, and it's not because of some form of asceticism or some form of self-mortification. That's not the reason. Here, the purification is the mental purification in terms of the reactions. So, because what you're going to notice is most of the pain, 90% of the pain that you experience, especially when you're getting into deeper stages, is what we call meditation pain. Yeah. It's a manifestation of trying too hard. If the mind starts to focus too much, there might be production of some kind of sensation of pain, whether it's in the head, whether it's in around the chest, whether it's in the shoulders, whether it's in the legs, whether it's in the buttocks, whatever. Now, there was an interesting discussion that Sil and I had, which is we're talking about how this pain can still arise, even if you're not pushing too much. And that pain can arise as a result of mind being bored. Mind needs some kind of stimulation, because in this quiet mind, there's no stimulation happening. So mind is just producing this experience so that it remains distracted and is remaining stimulated.
Okay.
So you have to let go of that.
Thank you.
Welcome.
How to apply or balance determination in meditation and in worldly plans or goals, where we need to often change or adjust. So how to balance?
When you refer to determinations, are you talking about like determinations of getting into jhana and things like that? Or are you talking about just general intentions and choices and decisions?
Yes, more about the general routine, worldly things, how to apply, because there we have to change often, or things don't happen as we plan or think of it. Like,
Yeah.
So does that makes the mind more flickery, and does it affect meditation, or how to get that?
So let's say you have a goal. Let's say you have a certain kind of career goal or a certain kind of goal that you want to achieve at the end of next year. And you have that in mind, and that's okay. You continue to do what you have to do in reference to completing that goal or achieving that goal. But the outcome itself is not in your hand. All that's in your hand is how you respond to situations, the decisions you make in reference to achieving that goal. If that goal is not achieved, that's not because of, and you've done everything you can for the achievement of that goal. And if it's still not achieved or something gets in the way of that, you cannot control whether that outcome is reached or whether something gets in the way of it. But you can control, or rather understand, your reactions to that situation, your reactions to the impediments towards that goal. So it always comes back to not what is happening externally. Whatever is happening externally is just feeling, is just an impersonal feeling, impersonal experience. You have intentions to achieve something, that's also something that you put out there in the way of your mind, in the way of your speech, in the way of how you interact with people and your physical actions. But you're still not in control of what responses you get from it, what effects you get from it. You're only responsible for the actions that you produce. You're only responsible for the reactions or responses that you have. You're only responsible for the perceptions and perspectives you have about that situation. So if you find that in that achievement of the goal, it's not happening, how easy is it for you to let go of that? So obviously that means not having an attachment to the goal, just knowing that this goal is there. It's for your benefit. It is a wholesome goal. It will aid you and your family in a wholesome manner. But if it didn't happen, how attached are you to it? If you're very attached to it, you'll get upset, you'll get flustered, and all of those other things. But if you see it as being, okay, it didn't happen. It didn't happen the way I wanted it to happen. Nothing happens the way I wanted it to happen, really. It's just a series of causes and conditions. If you're able to see it in that way, then you let go and you experience peace in that moment. That peace arises because of the cultivation of being able to let go in the meditation. The more you practice letting go in your meditation, the easier it is for you to let go in daily life. And the more you're able to let go in daily life, the easier the meditation becomes. It's a feedback loop cycle.
Thank you.
Also, if you have a larger goal like that, there are going to be smaller goals along the way. And I find that if I get upset when I can't complete a smaller goal, it makes it way harder to complete. And so they can work in tandem like that.
Yes. That's a good point, actually.
Could I ask, is there an instructive sutta on the jhana type of determinations?
There isn't. As far as I know, in terms of determinations, there is not, but there is a set of instructions on the Dhamma Sukha website, which does refer to determinations. I don't know if you've been there or not, but you can ask one of the team on Suttavada. You can email them or ask them for the link, and they can provide you that. And it'll take you through each of the jhanas and how to practice the determinations in relation to being in the first jhana for a certain amount of time, whether that's for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, or whether that's being there for 5 seconds and then jumping from one jhana to another jhana, in a very random order, and then ultimately with cessation. But I would recommend for anyone who's interested in doing determinations to wait for a little while until you have a lot of comfort with the jhanas. You really understand the different factors of this. And then ultimately, it is a little stringent, but I would say wait until you become an anagami to really do determination, because then you don't have any obstruction of craving or aversion. And it's much easier then for you to go into Nirodha, Samapatti, all these other.
One question about you talk about meditation pain, right?
Yeah.
But you described as because mind is bored, so that's why the meditation pain comes. But when your mind is focused around 3 and 4, there is a one-pointed going to the one-pointedness, and then often there is a pain. But is it because in other place, and there you can focus on the one-pointedness, but you are saying that when it occurs to your body, just 6R and let it go of the tension in body. Is it correct?
You cannot 6R the pain away.
Mm-hmm.
You can't 6-star the pain away. You can only 6-star the reaction to the pain. See, the pain seems worse than it actually is because of undue attention to that pain. Anything your attention flows to, anything your attention goes to, that causes the strengthening of that. So if your attention is rooted in the object of meditation, not one-pointed, obviously, but if it's just staying with the object of meditation, then because there's no more fuel given to the pain, your pain starts to subside. The mental feeling of that pain subsides.
Yeah, but
so
sometimes there is a pain even if your mind is not reacting, because so I want to hear.
But eventually it will fade away. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, sure. Nothing is permanent. Nothing is permanent, but there is a period. But then, because
but it
what
seems like it's permanent. It seems like it's permanent in that moment because the attention is given to it. But as soon as you give a little time, and when I say little time, that can be as little as 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour. Doesn't really have any strict time. But when there's enough attention given to just the object and no attention is given to that pain, and because there's no reaction given to that pain, it will subside eventually. Bhante Vimaramsi, for example, he came to a point where even when the pain was there, he didn't mind it. He understood that the pain was there. And he came to such a point that he didn't even feel the pain because he started becoming so centered around his attention that he completely let go of that pain. Even if it was there, it didn't affect him at all anymore. So the pain will still be there up until a certain point in time. And that that is the last real mental hindrance that is discussed within this practice that needs to be let go of in the form of attachment to that pain or aversion for that pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the way you know that to be mental pain, or let's say a mental experience because it's meditation pain, is as soon as you move and you make adjustments, that pain goes away. Because now the mind being distracted away from the pain, feeling that experience of relief from having made the adjustment, that pain fades away. But if it was actually physical pain, when you move around, that physical pain will still be there. This is the way to distinguish between what is meditation pain and actual physical pain. So if you have actual physical pain, then the recommendation there is to make proper adjustments so that your body is comfortable when it's sitting for long periods of time.
Okay. So it's not because you are telling us during this question and answer that meditation pain arises because mind was bored. That was my question.
Yeah.
But because that's not what I think.
When mind is bored, it does all kinds of things. When mind is bored, it does all kinds of things. It will throw up all kinds of ideas. It can throw up pain. It doesn't always throw up pain. We're saying that a possibility of that pain arising as a mental meditation pain can be because the mind is focusing too hard, or because the mind is bored and just wanting to distract itself, wanting to do something. The mind is like a little kid. It needs attention. It needs distraction. It needs to do something or another. So another manifestation of boredom is restlessness. So if mind is bored, it will throw up a lot of different kinds of thoughts and ideas and concepts. Especially when you start to get into quiet mind, you'll start to see that. And the way to let go of that is to obviously release and relax it, and then bring in a little bit of the tranquility factor, bring in a little bit of the equanimity factor, bring in a little bit of the collectedness factor. Or another manifestation of boredom is that the mind goes into sleep mode. It goes into dullness and it experiences sloth and torpor. That way you balance it with the other enlightenment factors. You bring in a little bit more attention, bring in a little bit more energy, bring in a little bit more joy, bring in a little bit more attention to the object, collect your attention more around the object of meditation. So I see this as being a focusing of the lens of attention, and then making the balance correctly so that it's resting on the object rather than going one way or the other. When we talk about pain arising because of boredom, we're saying that it's just one of the manifestations that can happen as a result of that boredom. It doesn't happen all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Any last questions? Hey, share some merit.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And Q&A is tomorrow at the same time as the Dhamma talk. So see you all then. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.